Hey, family, this is Bishop John Selkins, and welcome to our occasional, but I'm going to tell you something. Can I tell you a secret? We're going to be doing this on a more regular basis, having what we call relevant conversation. I'm your host, and we'll have different guests. We'll talk about a wide variety of stuff. We're going to talk tonight here in Connecticut, particularly. We're in the middle of what is election season for us here in the United States. For those of our friends that are going to be listening to us and watching us from across the globe, and in particular here in Connecticut, we're in our primary election. It's actually happening tomorrow, August 9th. This is August 8th, 2022. And so we wanted to have just a sit down and chop it up with a couple of our friends and comrades in the struggle. And so let me just bring them out of the green room on live. James Jeter, I want you to introduce yourself and tell the folk about yourself. Reverend Taryn Lepke, let me bring you into the room from Common Cause, Connecticut. Introduce yourselves. But James, why don't you start?
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm James Jeter from the Full Citizens Coalition. We are a voter rights protection and advocacy coalition who engage in civics throughout this state. We ran a 3-year campaign called Unlock the Vote to restore the rights to men and women on felony parole. We were able to move that legislation in 2021. We are now engaging in a campaign called Vote Unlocked, where we are doing implementation on that legislation, and we are pushing for suffrage. We want everybody to vote. We want the communities that are most impacted in this state through the carceral system to be able to unroot that disengagement in the carceral system by having those who are incarcerated on felony charges having their rights restored to vote. That's what we do, and we're open to have that conversation with anybody in the state. We love to engage the state. We engage it through workshops and barbershops, which Bishop Selkins has been involved in, churches, schools, wherever. We love to have this conversation about community. That's who we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother James. Reverend Taryn, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell the folk a little bit about what you are involved in and what you guys are doing out here in these streets.
Okay. Well, thank you, Bishop. It's a pleasure to be here with you and James. So I'm Taryn Lepke. I am the statewide organizer for Common Cause in Connecticut, and we do voting rights organizing and advocacy. Sherry Quickmeyer is our executive director, and we've been involved with, the Citizens Election Program was something that Common Cause in Connecticut spearheaded along with a lot of other folks, from what I understand, before my time, like 10 years ago. And that has opened up access to folks running for office in some pretty important ways. in the last couple of years, we've been really astounded by the outpouring of, community support for things like, voting absentee due to COVID. And we were happy to play a part in the wider campaign of making sure that folks on parole have their voting rights restored. And that's just a couple of things where this year early voting is on the ballot. There's more things that I could talk about. Tomorrow we're running election protection for the primary election, which is a nonpartisan program to support voters and address issues. We have people on the ground. I could say a lot, but I'm just happy to be here, and we'll see where the conversation goes.
Thank you, Reverend Taryn. And yes, we have partnered with Common Cause Connecticut and other partners, the Connecticut League of Women Voters, and a number of others. And Brother James and I had such big fun. I just have to say it. I got a name. I had such big fun at the barbershop. Would you not believe? Who would have thought that we would have riveting political conversation while you getting your hair touched up? It just. We had a blast. We had a couple of conversations. In fact, James and the team hosted 5 or 6 of them across the state. Brothers know and sisters do too. There's some fire conversation that happened at them beauty shops and barbershops. I mean, folk talk more junk. They talk more junk than anybody, and so it was fire. And I look forward to the opportunity to do that kind of stuff again. I believe what's important, and that's why we're doing what we're doing tonight, and what we will continue to do is to make the case to you all and bring it right to where you live at, right onto the Facebooks, to the YouTubes, and to the social media platforms that we are engaged in. The conversations that are important, that are relevant, and the conversations that we actually want to have. I mean, folk are having all kinds of conversations. Why don't we have the conversations we want to have? The conversations we often have that are not on mainstream, right? These are the conversations that are important to us. And can I just say this? And without any of my friends and people who love me and the people who don't so love me, would want to say, listen. We know when election season is about to happen, because that's when you see the politicians. I can't get if I was in the church, somebody be saying amen or well. All right. So it's about now when all your favorite folk who have office show up in your spots, right? They show up at the social club. They show up at the church. They show up on the block, in the street, at your hangouts. We want to, and that's okay. I mean, that's how they do it here. That's how it go. I would that we would change that so that we can engage in conversations that are important to us and important to us politically, not just when it's time to get out to vote, right? And so here we are having this conversation, but I'm glad to be having this conversation with you. One, because these are our statewide elections, right? These are our constitutional office holders. So that's for those of you, let's just do a little history lesson. We're talking about the governor, the lieutenant governor, the treasurer, right, and the secretary of the state. Those 4 offices are what we call our constitutional offices, right? Am I right? Right. So those we have to have that, otherwise the state ain't we ain't doing what we're supposed to do constitutionally, right? Those offices have to be in place. We got to hold those elections. We got to hold those elections every 4 years. And then there's some protocol. If somebody steps out of position, governor appoints, and then you got to have a special election when it's in, all of that stuff. All of that happens, right? And then we have, in our 169 towns here in the state of Connecticut, we have representatives who form what we call the state legislature, right? There's 2 houses. The state legislature has 2 houses. There's the Senate and there is the House, right? And typically speaking, each district has 1 or 2 representatives in the House, And in the larger senatorial context, we have typically in an area, you have a state senator, right? There are, I believe there are 36 state senators, and there are about 200 and blah, blah. I don't know, that number has changed now because we done had some redistricting, and I want to talk a little bit about that. But we've had some redistricting that has gone on based on the census and the census number. So that's how that's calculated. And then we have a conversation about that in the state. And Taryn, I hope we can talk a little bit about how that happens, because many of us miss that moment. And that's an important moment to be in those conversations about how these district lines are drawn, how gerrymandering actually occurs. And we have a little bit of fishy that goes on here, but I digress. That's okay. I'm done. I'm done with the history lesson. I think. So that's what we are faced with this election cycle, right? And so here we are. Each party holds their own primary, and so in those districts, if you are a Democrat or you're a Republican or you're a Green Party or you're an independent, right? You show up at the poll and you vote for your candidate of choice. That then, once those election numbers are tabulated, then they go on to the general election that happens in November. How am I doing, James and Taryn?
You rolling?
Well, you're doing great. It's except you're talking just about the primary, right?
I'm talking about the primary. I'm talking about the primary. I'm not talking about the general election. That's a whole nother thing. I'm just talking about what's going to happen tomorrow.
So, unfortunately, it's only registered Democrats and Republicans. None of those other parties have primaries in Connecticut, and so there's, it's kind of this big secret, these primary elections. There's not enough publicity about it, right? And so you actually have to be a registered Democrat or a registered Republican, registered with the party through the registrar, in order to vote on primary day in the party primary. And if you're registered to vote but not declared as one of the parties, you cannot vote in the primary. And so today happens to have been the last business day before the election, upon which you could have showed up in person at your town clerk to declare your party if you were formerly unaffiliated only. If you were switching parties, that was a May 9th deadline.
So you see how tricky this get already. See, that's why I wanted to raise it up. There's all kinds of stipulations and all kinds of parlaying that you got to know about. And can we be frank and honest? Most of us don't know anything about none of this. We just show up at the poll and vote, right? So that's why I wanted to have this conversation. That's why I wanted to have these kinds of discussions. So in actuality, we become a more informed voter, right? All right. So thank you, Taryn. James, let's get at it. We have running for governor. I think we have a couple of candidates, both on the Republican side and on the Democratic side. I think there are a couple of other folk who are out there. But let's talk about the Republicans and the Democrats. Of course, our current governor has announced, and he's on the ballot to run for re-election, and that's Governor Ned Lamont, right? Mm-hmm. Who else is on the ballot?
On the Democratic ballot?
On the Democratic ballot. Is he running unopposed?
He's the endorsed candidate for the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm. On the Republican side,
Big Bob
Stephanopoulos, right?
Stefanowski.
Let me get the man's name right. Let me just get the name. If I would get his name right, Stefanowski. Bob Stefanowski. This is, in fact, many of you will know this. This is a repeat of our general election 4 years ago. Bob was the endorsed Republican opponent. Now, I understand he's not running opposed. There are a couple of other people in that race, or were in that race. Now, is that still the case on the Republican side? There are a couple of candidates, right?
I believe he's now. Oh, go ahead, Taryn. I believe he's now the Republican endorsed candidate.
He is the endorsed candidate. So the other folk just didn't make the muster. All right. Taryn, you wanted to say something? Okay. All right. Then we have running for lieutenant governor is Susan Boschwitz, right? Yep. She also is stepping up to say, hey, I want another crack at it. It is traditionally understood that both the governor and lieutenant governor, they run as a team. But it was very interesting. We had last election, there was a little bit of all that didn't happen quite like it normally happens, right? We had in fact somebody that I know very well was in that race for a little bit, and it made for an interesting conversation and it made for an interesting race. It just wasn't a rubber stamp. We actually had to have conversations. And can I just say this, and y'all folk don't get mad at me? I like it when we do that we mix it up, that we have full robust conversation. How about you two?
I love it. I think that the approach to all of these elections, one, I think that our communities are too distracted by candidates, and we don't have enough community conversations about what is the criteria. So like what I love about the having the multiple candidates is that we get to treat it as bosses. If we choose, we can treat it as a boss. A boss, when he goes to hire, you create a criteria and people apply, and they come with their resumes, they come with their best, and you pick through who's going to do the job you've put together the best. We get away from that, and it becomes, a job built around a candidate instead of the best. You know what I mean? Like when we have just the criteria that we as a community want, we can have some real conversations, and candidates can bring their best strategy. They're pushed to bring their best. And so I love it. I love the diversity when we have it.
Absolutely. Absolutely, James. More people expressing their views. From the beginning, the democracy in this country has not been our democracy, right? From the beginning, it's been democracy for the few rich white men from the beginning. And it's been this laborious process of people fighting overall, as over all these generations to broaden. And, when we see people, in Connecticut, that's why we started the Secretary of the State candidate questionnaire. We have a nonpartisan questionnaire for candidates that's now out to everybody in the whole state who's a candidate. We started it way back in February because we knew that would have been a time when we started it with Secretary of the State. Who knows what the Secretary of the State is out in the world, like out on the street? Like, what isn't that where I get my driver's license? Maybe there's maybe that, right? I don't know if people know that the Secretary of the State is like in charge of elections, right? And like what goes down, in polling places and access and all of these things, language access, like all the things, right? So we had a nonpartisan candidate for him. I think you might have been there, Bishop Selders, way back in February for Secretary of the State before the party endorsements were out in the party conventions, on purpose, because there were like 12 people in the race at that point. There were like 12 people on the ballot for Secretary of the State. And we wanted to hear from all of them, and so I 100% agree. It's good to lift up many voices, right? In what we're trying to call, and what is a democracy that needs to be healthier and stronger.
Well, let's just go on down to it. I think of these constitutional positions, the Secretary of State position is the hot one, right? That's the one that's contested on the Democratic side. We have Stephanie Thomas, who's running, and Sister Bond is running. Maritza Bond is running, and here in Connecticut as well, the party gets to endorse a candidate. And so, of course, when you're running in the name of a party, you want the party's endorser, right? So Stephanie did get the endorsement. However, Labor is endorsing Sister Maritza. So it's a hot one, right? It's going to be a hot one on the Democratic side. On the Republican side, I don't know the candidates on the. I guess I shouldn't say that. I haven't been really paying attention on the other side, but I understood that early it was also to a hotly contested position. I think they settled on who they were going to endorse.
Did they settle?
Well, you tell me.
They may have. I haven't. All I know is that there were three on the ballot: Terry Wood, Brock Weber, and Dominic Rapini. And I have not heard. I'm not in close on the partisan discussions, right? And so all I know is that, to the best of my knowledge, they're still on the ballot. That could have changed. There could have been an announcement that I haven't tracked. Absolutely. So
yeah. And I want to say that as well. I may not have tracked. I do know Terry Wood and Dominique Rapini were the two that were on the Republican side, and there was a third one that had threw their hat in the ring there as well. So Secretary of State. So let's talk about that job just for a moment, James. You raised it. Let's do a job description and let's see what these positions are. Secretary of State. Obviously, there is something that the Secretary of State, that position holds a particular kind of responsibility for us. Can you talk about that just a little bit, man?
This is the person that is that has the final say, the oversight of our legislative process. What that looks like in this state is the structure of absentee balloting, the structure of how people are operating at different polling districts, and when early voting can happen. Like, they are going to oversee that these things are happening according to the law, the way that they're written in the law. And if we get a really active one, they'll be pushing on the progression of accessibility for Connecticut citizens to be able to make sure that they are included in our democracy, which is, I think it's for me, and I know for Taryn also, this is like the exciting position. Like, this is the position that you want to see held by someone who is super conscious and proactive in ensuring that we have a healthy and bolsters democracy, and that civic engagement is really happening in our cities. I mean, because it happens in other places, but our cities, like, we want someone who's going to look at how do we produce stronger outcomes in our cities and what needs to happen. So for me, this race is super exciting. I do believe that the Republican side is also being contested. You don't see the commercials until the week of. Like, you start seeing commercials like 3 days before for the primary. So they just started running. I just seen Dominic's commercials, so I'm assuming he's being contested.
Terry Wood is the other candidate, and there was a third candidate, Brock Weber, who actually did drop out after. So on one side, there was a claim. I'm just saying it was a claim that Connecticut has a whole lot of election fraud, whole lot of voter fraud, right? So that one side is pushing that language. I think the current Secretary of State and the most recent past, because Denise Mayor did resign. There's somebody that's in the spot just in an interim way until this election occurs. She couldn't find any. If there was some election fraud, they couldn't find it. They could. I mean, you get the occasional somebody that signed up, put the wrong name, or something gets misplaced, whatever. And of course, there's a little allotment, for that. But we don't have wide, voter fraud. But can I just say something? And again, I'm just saying it because it needs to be said. Pay attention to where your election polling place is. Pay attention to that, because a little thing that happens here every now and then, especially after the census and when they do redistricting. They also will move where you vote at, your poll. And I can tell you, I've gotten caught up several times personally in thinking I'm going down there to vote, and I don't, you give yourself the time to go do that. And I vote in every election. I feel like it is my civic duty to show up and go down there, even if I don't like nobody. I'm gonna go down there and say I don't like none of y'all, and I'm gonna say that, right? But I'm gonna do that because that is the right as a citizen in this country to do that, right? And as a citizen and a taxpayer in whatever town I am in, right? You go down there and do that. But every now and then they play ring around, ship your polling place around. So you better pay attention to that. And I got caught up in that several times, like several consecutive elections when my polling place changed. And what it was for, at least for me and for my beloved, if we hadn't been determined that's what we were going to do, we were going to vote tonight, we could have gotten thrown off and just said forget it, right? And I think some of the brothers and sisters, some of our constituents do that, right? So that's another piece that I think we ought to just lift up, that you do need to pay attention, and you can go do that on the website, right? There's the Secretary of State's website. You can go there, put your zip code, your address, and then it'll tell you where your poll is.
Yeah, I think like education around this right here is like super important, because when you live in like the three cities, you have borderline transient populations where in 1 year somebody moves 3 or 4 times, and so keeping up to where you're supposed to be voting at, or keeping up to the address change and the district changes, it becomes tedious. People forget. But also, last election we were out in front of City Hall, bringing people in to do election day registration. But what we found out, what we had to do was we had to redirect and find the polls for over 300 people, because they thought that they can come to City Hall and vote that day. So like there's a lot of just being educated on the process in itself. It is the work that has to be done. But yeah, I wouldn't call anything fraud.
Absolutely. Can I jump in just for a second, Bishop Selders? So I could even pop up we have on our website, we tried to make it easy for folks to get answers to questions about voting. It's 866-OUR-VOTE is a free hotline you can call. That's 866-OUR-VOTE. And we have our nonpartisan election protection information readily accessible, and it links, for example, to this is what we're doing tomorrow, is running election protection. So it links right to that spot on the Secretary of the State's website where you do check your polling place. But you have to know that's there. You have to know that website exists, right? And so it doesn't exist if you don't know it exists. I mean, so in practicality. So just in terms of, so I just want to keep repeating 866-OUR-VOTE is a hotline anyone can call with any questions about voting. It's 24/7. It's free. It's nonpartisan. It's not affiliated with Democrats or Republicans or anybody. It's a nationwide effort. There are lawyers who volunteer time on there. They have all the latest information on Connecticut. Any question you can imagine. We've got a very comprehensive voter frequently asked questions that's got pretty much anything you can imagine we got an answer to. So it's just good to know about.
Thank you very much. Let's raise the other one up. We have the candidates for treasurer. On the Democratic side, there are three candidates that are running. Sean Rubin, who would have been the incumbent, decided not to run and seek re-election. And so Brother Eric Russell, Sister Karen DuBose Walton, and Dita Bagiba, who are running on the Democratic side. And I think on the Republican side for treasurer, I think that the endorsed candidate is Harry Aurora. And so I think the Republicans have settled that on their side what the race is. So that seems to me to be an interesting, on the Democratic side, seems to be an interesting race as well. Any of you would like to comment on that race as well?
I ain't gonna say much. I'm gonna say I'm a New Haven native, so Eric and Karen, this is it's just interesting. I think it's gonna be interesting to watch. Eric is actually endorsed. He's the Democratic endorsed candidate being contested. So I think it's gonna be interesting. I appreciate it. I appreciate people pushing one another to present and give their best for a position. I think that's how it should be. So I'm looking forward to seeing what this outcome is.
Well, Bishop Selders, I would say that along us being nonpartisan, our survey is still there's 5 issues, and all 3 of those candidates on the Democratic side have responded to the issues that we put out in our survey: early voting, no excuse absentee voting, studying ranked choice voting. For Connecticut, a Connecticut Voting Rights Act to give Black, Brown, and other voters of color additional protections against voter suppression, and then banning foreign spending on state ballot measures. All 3 of them have answered, saying that they support all 5 measures. Likewise, with the Secretary of the State candidates on the Democratic side, both have said they support all 5 measures, with a caveat though, and that's at ourdemocracy2020.org. And all the candidates that are out there in the field have this, and we have over 80 candidates responding. And there's a lookup thing. You can put your address in, and it'll only use it to find your candidates, but it'll spread all the candidates right in front of you for your address. And if they've responded to the survey or not. What's handy is you can see all your candidates in one spot too. Just that aside. So I would just say, they've all responded, and you can look and see the nuances of how they answer the questions differently, at least on voting rights.
Thank you, Brother Tan. And we'll circle. I want to circle back before we end tonight. I want to circle back to that website again. I think it's a very helpful website. It's easy to look at and easy to use. Reverend Taryn has allowed me to, do a beta testing on it just to see how our candidates respond. What's of some interest to me as well. Okay, I'm gonna say something else. Might get me in a little bit of hot water. Some of our more established office holders feel like they don't have to explain themselves. So when you go on there, pick your favorite elected official, state legislator. See who's responded and who has not. It ought to be that if you hold the spot, then you ought to be at least willing to be conversant about the positions you've taken. And open maybe to have people tell you they don't like what you said or what position you took that's different than the position that you took. Shouldn't it be we're able in this small state? Now I'm not talking, I'm just talking about Connecticut. That's where I live. Shouldn't we be able to talk to our state legislators and say, hey, sis, hey, brother, hey, senator, hey, state rep, what you doing? What was you thinking? Might you need to explain the position you took, especially to those who are your constituents in your districts? I think that's what we call accountability. And ultimately, what is the accountability marker is the vote. Can I just say that? And please don't get mad at me. It's my opinion. And what I said in our barbershop tour, I said this, and I'll say this here on this platform. You can have a whole lot of opinions. I can't really hear you if you're not registered to vote and you don't vote on a regular basis. Because as you know, Brother James, some of us want to vote and can't. And too many of us, we come from long lines of folk who fought so that we could get a right to vote. and you toss it away like it's just nothing. And I say that's not correct, right? I know. I know all the arguments why we say it don't matter, all that. Right now, this vote that came to the Supreme Court, this decision around Roe versus Wade, was decided because a president got elected, and he then appointed and nominated people to sit on a court that you don't get elected to. You're appointed on, you're confirmed by the Senate, and you hold the position for your lifetime. Talk to me. And so, you say elections don't matter. I say they do. They do. And then when the one side wins, when they get to set the agenda, right? So a particular party and a particular candidate, their ranking a person then gets to sit at the chair of a committee that then sets the agenda of that committee. So they won't even bring certain things to the committee to vote on, to bring to the wider group, because you didn't win the election. You reset the agenda. So elections matter, ma'am. Elections matter, sir. And so that's why we're here having this conversation about what it might mean, even in a primary situation. In primaries, where parties are trying to decide who are they going to endorse and bring forward for us in a general election. Again, here in Connecticut, we have this primary election that happens tomorrow, August. Why I keep sounding April, August, and August, April? I don't know, but I'm going to get it right. August 9th, we have this primary election, and it will lead us to the general election in November. Okay? All right? So it's incumbent upon us and you as individuals and us collectively to inform ourselves about what are the issues that are important, and then what these candidates say to those issues, what they speak to, how they represent themselves. And Reverend Taryn, Common Cause's tool, I think, is one important tool for us to assess who and what those candidates, what they think and what they support and how they believe and what their rationales are.
Amen. Well, look, I mean, yeah, the freedom to vote, I mean, that is at the center of everything. And you both know this way better than I ever could, right? Being a white man, I have no access to what it's really like to not be white in this society. I can try to empathize. I can be an ally. But the freedom to vote is not something to be joked with, right? I mean, and the fact that it is access to expressing and changing the world on every front, and everything a person believes, like you said, matters not if the person can't carry that voice into electing candidates that share their values. And there's a lot stacked against Black and brown communities and other communities of color, and even working class people in general, except for not necessarily the white working class. There's a long conversation there, but they get used anyway. Anyway, yes. Since voting rights and the right to vote and expanding the electorate are so central, I personally do believe it's important to know what folks are saying. How do you want me to say anything more about it? Do you want me to show the tool on the screen, or what do you want to do?
What I want to do is make sure that folk know what we'll do. We'll put it in the chat after this airs. Okay. Those websites and those links to it. I haven't prepared to make sure that it's able to be seen in the same kind of light. So what we'll do is we'll place it in the chat after after our conversation, where folk can go to view the tool. It's a survey over, as you said, Reverend Taryn, over 80 elected officials have already they're already participating in it. I hope to encourage far more to do that, because let's really be clear. There are only a few. This is what's funny to me. There are only a few contested primaries. Incumbents, only 4 incumbents are being primaried. So that ought to say something to you. That ought to say something to you about what we got going on in this state. And that's okay, right? As we know, I won't ever forget. We had a candidate in a national election here from this state lose his Connecticut primary, run as an independent, register, get the sign, get the votes, get the signatures to get placed on the ballot to run as an independent, and won. He was the incumbent, lost his party's nomination, and yet still won back his seat as an independent. So listen, a whole lot of stuff can be done. It taught me, don't play anybody short. Don't play nobody short in this state right here, because it can happen. This Connecticut, right? But we have four incumbents that are being primaried. One of the hotly contested seats are the 4 in the House, and I think there's one on the Democratic side. I think there's 1 or 2 on the Republican side. There's only 1 Senate seat that's being primaried on the Republican side. So this field, this opportunity in several of these very, very specific districts, we got some hotly contested campaigns, and I think it's incumbent upon us both to get out there and vote, inform ourselves, use tools like Reverend Taryn has offered up that Common Cause Connecticut is using. There are other spaces and places where these conversations are being had, and inform ourselves and get out there and see really, one, see what's important to you, right? And then see who's talking about the things that are important to you, right? And press them on it. I mean, because sometimes you don't even know what's important to them because you haven't asked the question, or it ain't came up, right? Anyway, I can say a whole lot. I'm gonna say less, James. I'm gonna say less.
I think another part of that is see what's important to your neighbor. See what's important to your child's bus driver. See what, because I think we don't. It's one thing to hold a politician accountable, but the theory of this of the experiment of America is, how do you give the power of a king to every citizen, right? And that is the ability to elect your government and have them work for you. You are the boss, and so what employee doesn't respond to a boss's review? When you go for your yearly review, you got to respond to some things, and so when someone says, well, I don't got to respond to that, if you got to think about, if you were at your job and your boss came in and said, it's time for your yearly review, we need to know how did you perform in these areas, and you say, well, that's not what I want to talk about. Matter of fact, I'm not even going to talk to you about that. More than likely you won't have a job. And so how is it that this part of our system has been able to function for so long without the same criteria? And then we have to own that. And the reason why you need to talk to your neighbors is because if it's not just you, if it's not just your issues being ignored, but you realize, oh snap, all of my neighbors have the same issue and no one's addressing it, then at least you're able to start talking as a community about how to address the lack of support around your issues, and then what to do next. Because it's not just about electing people, it's also having the power to unelect people, to move people out, and then that in itself becomes a sign to whoever's coming in that, oh, they get rid of people around here, maybe I need to do this job. We haven't wrestled as a community with the theory of it all yet. This state abolished slavery as a practice in 1848 with the caveat that blacks couldn't vote. And so when you look, 170 some odd years later, and you walk down to people saying, "Oh man, that junk don't ever work." It's like whose agenda has won out in time, and when you look at the fact that your board of ed is decided by a few hundred votes per seat in cities of 50,000 registered voters, and then you can't complain about the school system no more. Like, we have to take accountability to the complaint. Like you said, if you ain't registered and you ain't active, I don't really care for your complaints and your opinions, because we have to take accountability and then work with ourselves to really push the power. It's our power. It's our power. Being distracted, you get distracted. And if you don't listen, then you believe that you caught in a fight of parties, and you're not caught in a fight of parties. So when you see the commercials and so and whoever they are, they're saying, I'm the right person to take it to the other side. Who's the right person to take it to your issues? Right? Like, that's what you need. That's what you got to figure out, yo. It ain't about the other side.
Well, you're talking my kind of language there, Brother Jeter. You're talking my kind of language. You're talking my kind of, because I say this. So you want to talk history. I love that you talked about this state abolishing slavery, yet did not give the vote to brothers and sisters, right, to black folk. In 1823, a black man, two black men, in fact, sued the state legislature, said, you take my tax money, but you won't let me vote. Isaac Glasgow, a black man, sued the state legislature in 1823. Now, of course, lost. But can I say this? We're celebrating today and the entire month Black August. Black August has come to be understood as Black resistance, not just here in the United States, but all across the globe. What does it mean to resist? What does it mean to say, no, I ain't going with that? I say no to that. I say yes to something else, and not just go along to get along. That, in fact, for me, there's something very, very powerful when you go down there and vote your ticket, as the old folk would say. Go down there and punch your card and say, you stand up in the neighborhood, you stand up in the community, you stand up in your particular space and place and say, here's where I'm on the record, right? When do we get a chance to say, I'm on the record and this is what I'm going to say? This is what I stand for. There's a lot of stuff you can say, I stand against something, but what do you stand for? Voting is a part of what I would call a spiritual practice. Don't get me to preaching now. I'm almost starting to preach right here. But a spiritual practice of saying, this is what I am for. And here are the conversations I want you to be talking about. So I think we also have the opportunity and the right, quite frankly, to say, you over there, y'all up there at the Capitol talking about this, but you need to be talking about that, right? We need to bring that to the fore. Well, Terry, you got something to say about that?
Oh, I just love it. Because I get asked, well, for a Connecticut Voting Rights Act, one of the things that's on isn't in the that's public knowledge is that Connecticut was the very first state, number one, to use racist literacy tests in polling, in voting, not number two, okay, or three. It's number one, and let's not think that spirit has died. I see it rear its head every year in the legislature, every year. And I could start naming names, and you know who they are already, because you've seen it, okay? It's alive and well. We were the last state to stop using them. One of the very last states to stop using that stuff. So don't tell me there's no voter suppression in Connecticut, because it's just the fact that we don't have early voting, that is voter suppression, isn't it? Can anybody disagree? It is a big giant. We're so trained in this state to think, oh, election day is election day. I go, if I ever think about voting, it's just on one day. Well, no, we're one of only 4 states in the country that doesn't have early voting.
And isn't that a shame? Isn't that a shame? In liberal, sophisticated New England, liberal Connecticut, that we don't have what most of the rest of the country take as, you know, is for granted,
including all those southern states. I'm just saying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think the other issue, like which that we're passionate about, is that you also see like this year in southern states, though they're wrestling with implementation, you see that they've made huge strides in a very short period of time where they have felony enfranchisement. I'm talking about Alabama, Mississippi, North Carolina, and so when we tote that, oh, this is not the South, well, that's not saying much. That's not they saying like the South is saying we ain't the North right now, you know. Yeah, like we even, I mean, we have issues with pretrial where people haven't been convicted and they haven't lost their rights, and we're talking over 4,000 people. So we're talking about, you know, when you have nearly 1,000 votes that are being taken out of our largest cities electorate. I mean, this is 1,000 votes in a mayoral race in Hartford, New Haven, and Bridgeport means something. You know, and so when you have these votes being removed, you know, and just from lack of access, this is the state that we're living in.
Yeah, I tell people I live here in Hartford, and if a candidate that runs for mayor can get elected in a city that has about 120,000 people in it, 125,000 people in it. Okay, we got 50, 60, 70,000 eligible voters. I can get elected as mayor with 6,000 votes. Something wrong with that. Y'all can't tell me it ain't something wrong with that. You can't tell me. You can get elected to a seat on the council, the common council, with 1,500 votes. I rest my case, Your Honor. But go to the barbershop. Go around there to the, you know, where you hang out at. I ain't gonna put you out on Front Street. But go around there where y'all hang out at, and start bring up a couple of issues, and then y'all got lots of opinions until I ask you, are you registered? Hey, did you vote in the last election? Then when you start, what had happened was, and yet there are other places. I mean, so in this town, let's talk Hartford. I'm just talking about Hartford. In Hartford, during the Obama, both his presidential runs, we had 33,000 people vote and participate in both of his elections, over 30,000. And we were saying, wow, that ain't even half of the people who are eligible to vote in this city. So yeah, I want to say we're doing better, but we have digressed. The last mayor election, 6,000 and some change got the current mayor elected. Something wrong with that. And I'm saying we can do better. We can do better. Let's go. Let's make the concerted effort to participate. I mean, it used to be that, you know, well, we got to do it now more than ever because elections matter, man. Sis, elections matter. All right, we almost at close. Any final thoughts? But James, what you got to share with us?
Yeah, along those lines of disenfranchisement, Connecticut has, as a state, created felony disenfranchisement right after they stopped with their literacy, their literacy requirements. You know, they immediately started to disenfranchise around felony convictions. These things have rooted our communities in cycles, intergenerational cycles of civic disengagement. And you know, we were talking about our last gubernatorial election was decided by about 10,000 votes. That's our prison population. This is a population that is over 73% Black and brown. The ability to have a say in these elections is the strongest form of rehabilitation they will receive. It'll root them in their communities in ways that many of them have never been rooted. It'll give them a say as parents in a way that they might have never thought through. They have the time to think through it, to get engaged, and to really be an asset to their communities. We didn't get to really touch on gerrymandering. I know you were waiting for Taryn to go into that. I hope he said something on it, but I think one of the trade-offs that we got with all the redistricting was that they ended prison gerrymandering in the state, and which means that these votes, the ability to vote, especially given all the redistricting, is super important. That this population of our citizens has that restored to them. It has nothing to do with crime punishment. Nothing. Finland has a recidivism rate the lowest in the world, and they accredit it to the fact that they never disenfranchise.
Boy, we got to say something. We can't close without talking about this a little bit. We can't close. So here, it used to be here in the state of Connecticut that wherever prisons are, let's say Enfield, all right, a lot of prisons up in the northern region of this state, they could count those prisoners, right, in the population, right, but not give not one of them the right to vote in Enfield. So those prisoners, even if they were registered to vote, no, they weren't. They took the voting right privilege away. But you count them and then not give the person the right to vote? Good God Almighty! So we changed that.
And you make money. You don't just count them. You get federal dollars for having a boisterous minority population in your town. In your very homogeneously white town.
That's right.
Yeah. I'm trying really hard to stay on mute. I'm trying.
Go ahead, Taryn. Get in this, man. Get in this. Go ahead.
Come on, just like James said, what the level of absurdity of that. They ought to be. They're not ashamed of themselves. They know who they are. They're here to keep black and brown people down. That is what they want. We have seen it. Let's not play. January 6th happened. It's all white supremacists. It just was. I'm sorry.
So when we talk about gerrymandering, we're talking about how districts are set up so that people can vote. And historically, this is, man, if we would just pay attention just a little bit. These districts are not set up in obviously, germane. They are skewed toward one particular population or another particular population. So, for example, in the state of Alabama, there are really 7 or 8 districts in that state that got significant numbers of black people in them. And yet, when they gerrymandered and set up the district, it's only 3 districts where the black people got to vote. While in those regions, they are the majority population. They gerrymandered the district so that it wouldn't be set up in the same way. I wonder if you'd ask the question how our districts are set up here in the state of Connecticut. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What that looks like. And of course, I have asked the question. I did get my answers. Black and brown populations are around our central urban centers. Bridgewater, Hartford, New Haven, New London, and Waterbury. Mm-hmm. How in the world then we can't have majority black and brown representation in those spaces and places? I'm just asking the question. I know when I ask the question, y'all, some folk get squirrely with me. I'm just asking the question. If we got the numbers, how come we can't? Why is it if you ask the question, those 5 cities, I'm just talking about, these cities. There are other questions to be asked. But in these 5 cities here in the state of Connecticut, every single ask me who is the chief executive officer of those towns, or the mayor. They're all white men. I rest my case. All right. So we got work to do, folks. here in Connecticut. We got work to do. And let me just say, I'm going to be on the case. I know what Taryn and Common Cause Connecticut on the case. I know what James and all the different places and spaces he is at. We're on the case. We're going to make this case very strong and make it very hard for folks to just say, well, you can't just talk stupid without backing it up with a couple of facts, right? You can say, oh, it's election fraud, but then prove it. Then when you go to prove it, then what had happened was, well, then see, it's a different thing. But I can tell you that in these majority chocolate towns, black and brown are the majority population in our urban centers. Look at the representation of both our elected officials and who are the people who hold significant positions in those towns. And what are their interests? Who are they looking out for? Right? Those are the questions we got to be asking. We got to be asking, are those folk who we have appointed, we have elected, we have asked to serve civically, are they representing our interests? Are they doing the things we need to have happen? How come it is that in these urban centers, we still have a lack of jobs and access to healthcare, access to money, and access to housing? How is that? And you tell me you're doing a great job.
How is it that every city asks for the restructuring of funds around their police departments, so there's more community money and you have better funded police departments than you've ever had? It's better funded, and that's just a reality. I think that I would love, and I think Common Cause is fit to do this, and I would love to work with them on this, is we need to have like an accountability campaign after election. There's going to be a whole lot of debates, whole lot of things being said, and which means there's going to be a whole lot of clips to create a whole lot of receipts. And that needs to be something that is, that is something that is hewn in on for communities, that they're able to say, no, you said this. We got all of it right here. We got all the promises you made, and here's where you're at. Where are you at with these? Because we've brought into the short-lived memory. We've brought into it. We've allowed it to exist in us to where, November by November 3rd, we're done as a community. We've checked out of what has transpired and what was told would happen, and we just wait till they show back up and start saying more stuff.
Listen, we got plenty more to say. We got plenty more to do. We got plenty more to talk about. I appreciate you, Brother James and Brother Taryn, for joining me in this riveting hour and a few minutes conversation. I promise you, we'll stay on the case. We're going to come back. We're going to talk more. We're going to spend time with folks. We're going to ask some of these questions of some of these elected folks, some of these people who were named and were elected to represent us. How they doing, right? And ask some of the people questions, have them struggle a little bit about with the hard questions. And let me just say this and be done with it. No, I ain't gonna be done with it. I'm gonna keep saying it. I ain't gonna be done. I promise you, I ain't gonna be done with it. There are real life consequences that are at the hands of folk who are playing politics, as opposed to people who are there on mission, right? And I believe it is the sacred right of those who seek to serve office, to actually represent the population, the will of the folk, not just the people who got money, right? And so I get it. You need people to support you with their dollars, and I get that. But also there are people who are out there who actually need us to do the right things. And let's you want to talk about accountability? I call for folk to represent us and do the right thing, right? There's left and right. You can put that to the side. That moves and blows like the wind, right? But what don't blow is what's right and what's wrong. You know what that is when you wake up. Yes, real people are impacted at the end of your plan politics, and enough of us ain't calling that out. And I say, let's call that out. Let's just go. Let's go to that. And so we're going to do more of these. Thank you all very much for taking out the time with James. But Terry, thank you for joining me. And I promise you, we'll be back again having these similar kinds of conversations. All right. All right. Thank y'all for listening, and we'll talk to you real soon. All right. Peace.